So while the 0, first and second conditionals talk about the future, the third conditional talks about the past. And in fact, it talks about a version of the past that didn't even happen. I'll tell you all about it inside today's lesson. I'm Greg, and this is your complete guide to the conditionals or if clauses in English. We've already talked about the 0, first and second conditionals. Today we're looking at the third conditional. Click up there to watch the whole series. So I'm first going to explain how we form this conditional. I'm then going to give you some examples and explain when we use this grammar structure. I'm then going to tell you how we can use it in questions and negatives and explain some common mistakes that students usually make when they're using this third conditional. So let's go! If you've seen my other videos in this series, you will know that all conditionals have two parts of the sentence. One part begins with if and it describes the condition, and the second part describes the result if that condition is true. In the case of the third conditional, the part of the sentence which begins if is followed by the past perfect. In other words, if I had eaten, I had taken, I had gone. And the second part of the sentence is would have plus the past participle. So would have spoken, would have taken. As always in English conditionals, it doesn't matter which order we put these two parts of the sentence. The only important thing is that if must go with the past perfect and the other part must have the would have past participle. So this third conditional looks like this. If I had eaten that, I would have been sick. Just a word about the pronunciation, because when we're speaking, we always use the contractions. So instead of saying if I had eaten, we would always say if I'd eaten. If I'd eaten that. And instead of saying would have, we would make the contraction and say would have, would have. If I'd eaten that, I would have been sick. You will also hear native speakers saying instead of would have, woulda, woulda. So when we're speaking quickly, this sounds like if I'd eaten that, I would have been sick. I would have been sick. Okay, so when do we use the third conditional? Yes, as I said in the introduction, we use the third conditional to talk about the past and talk about a version of the past that didn't happen. If I had eaten that, I didn't eat it. But if, hypothetically, looking at a version of the past that didn't happen, in which I ate it, if I had eaten that, and then we imagine the result of that situation in the past. If I had eaten that, I would have been sick. In reality, what happened is I didn't eat it and I wasn't sick. But if I had eaten it, I would have been sick. So we're describing an event that didn't happen in the past, and then we are imagining the result of that invented situation. Sounds complicated, but we do this all the time. You do this all the time in your native language. To talk about a regret or, oh, why didn't that happen in the past? If we'd scored that goal, we would have won the game. If I'd woken up earlier, I wouldn't have missed the bus. Oh, if I'd arrived on time to the interview, I would have got the job. It's a really common construction, so it's one you really should know and really not be afraid of in English. Now, using this in the negative isn't complicated, but when we're speaking and we use lots of contractions, it can become a little bit difficult to say or sometimes a little bit difficult to understand. So it's very important that you familiarize yourself with all these contractions and double contractions. Let's have a look what I mean. So Julie studied French at university. But if she hadn't studied French at university, an invented version of the past, because she studied French at university, if she hadn't studied French at university, she wouldn't have become a French teacher. So we use would in the negative, which is would not. We make the contraction, wouldn't. Then we have the word have, but as I said before, we also use a contraction of that. So would not have becomes wouldn't have, wouldn't have, wouldn't have. It's really important that you practice saying wouldn't have, wouldn't have. If you do, you will make the third conditional so much easier for yourself. I promise. So in that example, both parts of the sentence are in the negative. We could just have one part in the negative too. For example, she would have run much faster if she hadn't broken her leg. So here, it's only the condition that is in the negative. She broke her leg, but let's invent a past in which she didn't break her leg. Okay, if she hadn't broken her leg, she would have run faster. Okay, and how do we form questions in the third conditional? Well, basically, you want to start the question with the word would, and the if part of the sentence comes at the end. Would you have got the job if you had arrived on time? Would you have got the job if you had arrived on time? Okay, common mistakes. What is the most common mistake that students make when they're using the third conditional in English? Well, in my experience, the most common mistake is that students say something like this. She studied French at university, but if she had... which conditional is this? Past perfect. And they forget really what they're talking about. My advice, and it's so important with more complicated structures like this, my advice is this. Don't dissect the sentence into individual words. Instead, just dissect it into 2 or 3 chunks, 2 or 3 groups of words. When I gave you those negative examples, there were lots and lots of little grammar words like if, would, have, had, I, you. I mean, so many little grammar words. And when you're trying to construct a sentence by putting individual words in the correct place, it's so easy to make a mistake. So what can we do instead? Just learn a few chunks of words, and this third conditional will become much easier. So the chunks, the groups of words that I want you to learn together are things like this. If you're talking about something that didn't happen in the past, if I'd gone, if I'd come, if I'd been, if I'd taken, if I'd eaten, if I'd, and then you put the verb. And for the second part of the sentence, in the positive, I would have. Just learn it as one chunk, I would have, followed by the main verb. I would have gone, I would have eaten, I would have taken. Or, if you're using it in the negative, I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have. Imagine it's one word and just put it before the main verb you want to use. I wouldn't have gone, I wouldn't have spoken, I wouldn't have eaten. Another thing that I recommend you do just to practice this is something that you can easily do. Everybody can easily do this. And this is to make a chain story. So just choose one moment in the past in your life. This can be like the primary school that you went to. For example, I could say, I went to Mirfield Primary School. Now, we're going to imagine that that didn't happen. If I hadn't gone to Mirfield Primary School, I wouldn't have met my friend Phil. If I hadn't met Phil, I wouldn't have gone on a holiday with him. If I hadn't gone on holiday with Phil, I wouldn't have met that girl. If I hadn't met that girl, she wouldn't have become my wife. If she hadn't become my wife, I wouldn't have become the happy guy I am now. So this is an easy activity that you can do just to practice this, and the more you practice and the more you say these chunks of grammar words, the more natural they will come to you when you need to use them in normal, natural English conversation. In that book, you can learn all sorts of other very common mistakes that students make in English. That's my book, it's free. You can download it up there and then click there to watch my other lessons in this conditionals series. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you somewhere about there. Bye for now.